Last week, we saw that God doesn't suffer from compassion fatigue, that compassion is a defining part of his character, that his compassion for us never runs out, and that his compassion is seen most clearly in the heart of Jesus for sinners and sufferers, because Jesus is supremely the one who has compassion. This week I want to drill down a little further into what it means to say that Jesus has compassion. Today we're going to explore the question, how is Jesus able to sympathise with sinners and sufferers? My friend, the late Saul Cruz, was an extraordinary Christian leader. Saul became a Christian at age 13 when he read John Stott's classic book, Basic Christianity. At university in Mexico City, he was a leader in the IFES student ministry. At that age, he had already developed a passion to bring hope and transformation to poor and marginalised communities, sharing God's love with them and helping them to take responsibility for their own situations. After a doctorate in psychology, he worked for a few years in academia and the business world. Then, while he was still in his 20s, he and his wife Pilar founded Armonia, a Christian organisation that has established community centres in poor communities, initially in Saul's home state of Oaxaca in the south. During the mid-1980s, Saul worked for a couple of years with World Vision, Mexico. During that time, he conducted a survey of 1,000 churches in Mexico City. Saul discovered that a few churches were serving the small, very wealthy communities in the city, while almost all the churches were working amongst the equally small middle class, and none of these 1,000 churches were serving the poor, vast majority of the city's population. Saul and his family then started to work in the Jalalpa Ravine, one of Mexico City's biggest slums on the western edge of the city, with a population of millions. They established a community centre on a rubbish dump. Typical problems faced from day to day included the risk of destruction of people's homes caused by landslides and the frailty of the basic constructions, fires or collapsing mines, sickness accentuated by the existence of a river of sewage running through the lower area of the ravine. Some people even lived in the midst of this on man-made islands of rubbish. And gang-provoked violence. This community was characterised by appalling housing, lack of basic public services, school desertion, malnutrition, alcohol and drug abuse, teenage pregnancy, prostitution, religious superstition, witchcraft, and mafia-controlled groups. Saul told me that as an outsider he was not initially accepted in the slum community. Why not? Even living and working among the slum residents, he was regarded as a person of privilege and power who pitied them, but did not really share or understand their lives and could always leave the slum for a comfortable life among the wealthy. Then one day things changed. The sewerage from a neighbouring wealthy area emptied out into the ravine, and the effluent of the affluent flowed through the slum community. One day, the river of sewage caused a collapse, destabilising a large section of the slum and threatening many homes and lives. Help was not going to arrive in time, not here. So residents began to jump into the sewerage, and Saul jumped in with them as they worked desperately through the night to shore up the collapse and prevent a major catastrophe. That was the turning point. The residents of the slum knew that Saul's care for them was genuine because he had shared their suffering to the point of jumping into the river of sewage with them. We know that the compassion of Jesus for sinners and sufferers is genuine because he has jumped in with us. Does that sound unthinkable to you? Listen to these words from the Bible. Therefore, since we have a great high priest who has ascended into heaven, Jesus the Son of God, let us hold firmly to the faith we profess. For we do not have a high priest who is unable to feel sympathy for our weaknesses, but we have one who has been tempted in every way, just as we are, yet he did not sin. Let us then approach God's throne of grace with confidence, so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help us in our time of need. In Old Testament Israel, the high priest had a crucial role as an intermediary in the relationship between God and the people. In the New Testament, the letter to the Hebrews describes Jesus, the Son of God, as the great high priest, and a substantial part of the letter unpacks what that means. The passage we just looked at in Hebrews 4 says that in Jesus we have a high priest who has ascended into heaven. That's extraordinary. But the next verse says something even more stunning. In Jesus, the Son of God who has ascended into heaven, we have a high priest who is able to feel sympathy for our weakness. How is that possible? How can he possibly sympathize with sinners and sufferers? Jesus is able to feel sympathy for our weakness, we read, because he has been tempted in every way, just as we are. Dane Ortlund reflects on this extraordinary statement. He knows what it is to be thirsty, hungry, despised, rejected, scorned, shamed, embarrassed, abandoned, misunderstood, falsely accused, suffocated, tortured, and killed. He knows what it is to be lonely. His friends abandoned him when he needed them most. Had he lived today, every last Twitter follower and Facebook friend would have unfriended him when he turned 33. He who will never unfriend us. That enticing temptation, that sore trial, that bewildering perplexity, he has been there. Our tendency is to feel intuitively that the more difficult life gets, the more alone we are. As we sink further into pain, we sink further into felt isolation. The Bible corrects us. Our pain never outstrips what he himself shares in. We are never alone. That sorrow that feels so isolating, so unique, was endured by him in the past and is now shouldered by him in the present. The basic meaning of compassion or sympathy is to suffer with others. A compassionate heart expresses not detached pity, but shared suffering. Jesus showed this kind of compassion in his earthly life, and he shows it now as our great high priest who has ascended into heaven. He suffered with us, and he suffers with us still. Before he became a Christian, the Apostle Paul's name was Saul, and he was a zealous Jew who persecuted Christians. Acts chapter 9 describes his conversion. When Saul was on the road to Damascus, Jesus, who had already risen from the dead and ascended to heaven, revealed himself to Saul in a flash of light from heaven and asked him, "Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me?" Saul was persecuting Christians, but Jesus asked, "Why do you persecute me?" When the followers of Jesus suffer, he suffers with them. The Prince of Heaven does not look down on us with pampered pity. He feels our suffering as his own. He has been tempted in every way, just as we are, yet he did not sin. Perhaps you might ask, if Jesus never sinned, how can he really know the depths of what it means to be tempted? In a sense, he is the only one who really knows. In a wonderful book called Mere Christianity, C.S. Lewis writes, "You find out the strength of a wind by trying to walk against it, not by lying down. A man who gives in to temptation after 5 minutes simply does not know what it would have been like an hour later. Christ, because he was the only man who never yielded to temptation, is also the only man who knows to the full what temptation means. Have you seen the 1990s movie The Shawshank Redemption? It's not a family movie. It's the story of Andy Dufresne, a banker wrongly convicted of murder, who maintains his innocence and his integrity and survives nearly 20 years of harsh prison life before finally escaping through the prison sewer. His prison buddy Red, marvelling at Andy's ability to survive in prison and not lose himself, describes him as a man who crawled through a river of sewage and came out clean the other side. At one level, that is an apt analogy for Jesus' compassion for sinners and sufferers. He suffers with us, but when he jumps into the filth with us, he is not polluted by it. In fact, in the Gospels, we see again and again that the purity of Jesus is so powerful that when he comes into contact with those who are unclean, rather than being contaminated by them, he cleanses them. At another level, the prison experience of Andy Dufresne is not a good analogy at all. You see, the point of Jesus not sinning is that he came into our fallen world not as someone who needed saving, but as the one who is able to save. And in his compassion, Jesus didn't only suffer with us, he also suffered for us. What that entailed, the Apostle Paul writes in the starkest language, is that Jesus became sin for us. God made him who had no sin to be sin for us, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God. God made him who had no sin to be sin for us. What does that mean? Murray Harris explains it helpfully. Paul is not saying that at the crucifixion the sinless Christ became in some sense a sinner, yet he is affirming more than that Christ became a sin offering or even a sin bearer. In a sense beyond human comprehension, God treated Christ as sin, aligning him so totally with sin and its dire consequences that from God's viewpoint he became indistinguishable from sin itself. Jesus didn't just jump into the filth to help us. In his death he became the filth to save us. What does that mean for us? The Bible says that those who trust in Jesus have washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. Because of that, they have a new status, a new home, and a new future. Therefore, they are before the throne of God and serve him day and night in his temple. And he who sits on the throne will shelter them with his presence. Never again will they hunger. Never again will they thirst. The sun will not beat down on them, nor any scorching heat. For the Lamb at the centre of the throne will be their shepherd. He will lead them to springs of living water, and God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. Because the heart of Jesus beats with compassion for sinners and sufferers, and because the heart of Jesus stopped beating out of compassion for sinners and sufferers, for all who trust in him, this is our new status, our new home, our new future. Our passage draws two specific encouragements from having Jesus as the great high priest who sympathises with our weakness. Hold on tight and come to the throne. First, hold on tight. Because we have a great high priest in heaven who is able to feel sympathy for our weakness, let us hold firmly to the faith we profess. When suffering and persecution, temptation and doubt come like a flood and threaten to overwhelm you, when everything around you seems about to collapse, look to Jesus and hold on tight to the gospel rope. Second, come to the throne. And again, because we have a compassionate high priest who has been tempted in every way just as we are, yet without sin, Jesus who has suffered with us and for us, let us then approach God's throne of grace with confidence so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help us in our time of need. When life gets hard, because of Jesus, you can pray confidently to God for help. It's a tough time for us all. Jesus knows, Jesus cares, Jesus is with us in our suffering. So hold on tight and keep coming to the throne of grace for help.